order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Today, the Rules Committee is convening to consider three separate measures: H.R. 6359, H.R. 6945, and H.J.Res 140. H.R. 6945, the Supporting Pregnant and Parenting Women and Families Act, legislation authored by Representative Fishbach, would codify states' ability to use temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, funds to support pregnancy resource centers. TANF is a block grant program. States should be permitted to use these funds in the way they see fit. For many years, there was agreement that pregnancy centers were eligible entities. However, the Biden administration attempted to implement a slew of rules that would have blocked states from making use of these funds for various life-affirming resources for mothers, families, and children. These resources must be protected, and passing this legislation would take an important step towards doing just that. H.R. 6359, the Pregnant Students' Rights Act, would require colleges and universities to inform pregnant students of their rights and of the resources available on campus to ensure no woman feels forced to choose between motherhood and pursuing her education. Pursuing knowledge and having children, these are two virtues that carry immense social value and should be celebrated. I say should because, as is more often the case, modern society holds them in conflict with one another. Pregnant students should not be faced with the dilemma that their academic and future success must be sacrificed to an unplanned pregnancy. Data shows carrying a child to term does not have to hinder one's educational journey. With more people entering college at every station of life, it is critical that we pass the Pregnant Students' Rights Act. Finally, we'll turn to H.J.Res 140, a Congressional Review Act resolution providing for congressional disapproval of a Bureau of Land Management rule relating to withdrawal of certain federal lands in Minnesota. In January 2023, the Department of the Interior, at the direction of former President Joe Biden and former Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland, issued a public land order that instituted a 20-year mineral withdrawal covering 225,504 acres in the Superior National Forest in northern Minnesota. This mineral withdrawal banned mining and other responsible resource extraction in a strategically significant area of the Duluth complex, which is the largest untapped copper-nickel deposit in the world. Under the Federal Lands Policy and Management Act, the Department of Interior is required to notify Congress of public land orders impacting an excess of 5,000 acres. While the Biden administration failed to properly transmit its public land order to Congress in January of 2023, the Trump administration did just that, and as such, it is eligible for congressional review under the CRA. As always, I look forward to the spirited discussions that we'll have here today on these pieces of legislation. With that, I yield to the ranking member, Mr. McGovern, for any comments he wishes to make.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And on today's Republican agenda, control women, reward special interests, and prioritize the powerful while doing nothing to help regular people. I mean, look at what you're choosing to bring to the floor this week. We have a pair of bills designed to police pregnant women and steer them away from real care. H.R. 6359 forces colleges to push GOP anti-choice propaganda on pregnant students. And H.R. 6945 redirects resources meant for low-income families to anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers, places that pretend to offer real medical care, but actually push a political agenda. In Worcester, Massachusetts, where I live, my home city, a woman went to one of these centers. She was looking for care. She was told her pregnancy was healthy after an ultrasound. And a month later, she needed emergency surgery because the pregnancy was not healthy. It was ectopic. And as a result of the bad medical advice that Republicans are funding today, she suffered permanent, irreversible consequences. So yes, help pregnant students, help parents, help families. But if Republicans actually wanted to help families, they'd expand child care, lower prescription drug costs, protect Medicaid, raise wages, invest in SNAP, and build affordable housing. And they're not doing any of that here. This week's third measure scraps environmental protections in northern Minnesota so mining companies can bulldoze public land, threaten clean water, and leave communities holding the bag. Once again, Republicans bend over backwards to help out the billionaire corporations that dump pollution into our cities and towns. It's the same old story every time. And let me also say, Madam Chair, while this committee considers nonsense messaging bills, what we are not talking about is the global crisis that this president has started. We are currently dealing with a president who is attacking our friends, who is spinning completely out of control, who is one step away from launching a military strike on a NATO ally. So you may want to sit here and pretend like everything is normal, but it is not. Now, let me read you something that was made available to everyone publicly over the weekend. A letter from Donald Trump to Norway's Prime Minister. Let me quote it. Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. He goes on to say, and I quote, Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China. And why do they have a right of ownership anyway? And then he concludes with, the world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump. And then today, Trump shared a post saying that NATO, not Russia, not China, but NATO is the real threat. I mean, is that what the Republican Party believes now? That NATO is a greater threat than China? That NATO is a greater threat than Russia? I mean, what the hell is going on here? And by the way, the U.S. already has a military presence in Greenland. We already help protect the land from Russia and China. And Denmark has already offered to give us whatever we need to make sure Greenland stays safe. But I want to be very, very, very clear here. This is not bluster. This is not a joke. This is not Trump being Trump. This is not something you guys can shrug off or turn away from. This is a very, very, very serious situation. Denmark sent troops to Greenland to protect it from an American invasion. I mean, let that sink in. Our NATO allies are treating us like a belligerent power. Canada has signaled that such an invasion would activate Article 5, meaning our allies would be obligated to take military action against us. Do you guys realize how insane this is? And instead of de-escalating, Trump is ramping up his rhetoric. He's trying to bully and blackmail our closest allies, raising tariffs and trying to blackmail them into letting the United States annex a sovereign nation that, by the way, does not want to be part of the United States. Now, markets are watching the chaos, and Sell America is back in the headlines. The dollar is sliding as geopolitical and trade tensions flare. And Putin and Xi are watching America pick fights with friends while also giving them all the permission they need to take Taiwan, take more of Ukraine, and annex whatever the hell they want. And this brings me to a larger point. Today marks 1 year since Donald Trump was sworn into office. 1 year of unified Republican control, House, Senate, the White House. So I'll ask a simple question. Are Americans better off than they were a year ago? People do not want Greenland. They want health care. They don't want Venezuela. They want cheaper groceries. You guys have your priorities totally backwards. Nothing you have done is America first. This is all Donald Trump first. It was all a big lie. Supermarket bills are still crushing families. Rent is still out of reach. Energy costs still hurt. Trump's tariffs sure as hell haven't helped. And today you're pushing bills that restrict women's health care choices and making it easier for billionaires to pollute our air and water. Get a grip on reality. Millions of Americans have lost health coverage thanks to your policies and inaction. Wages are not keeping up with inflation. People are working harder than ever and getting less. Meanwhile, billionaires and special interests are doing just fine because Republicans have turned Congress into an all-you-can-eat buffet of favors for the rich and powerful. We all saw it from day one. The big tech CEOs lined up behind him at the swearing-in like it was a shareholders meeting. And since then, it's been one big giveaway after another for billionaires. Self-enrichment on top of self-enrichment. Trump and his family have made nearly $4 billion while working people are putting food back on the shelf because they can't afford it. And the majority's crown jewel, your big ugly bill, is the perfect symbol of the whole rotten deal. Take from regular folks who are already struggling so billionaires and big corporations can get more loopholes, more tax breaks, and more giveaways. And by the way, the big ugly bill also gave $75 billion in new funding to ICE. I mean, that's where your health care money went. Your health care, America, your health care money went to ICE, and ICE is using it to sow fear and chaos in our communities. So after 365 days, I'm here to tell you that there are no more scapegoats. No more saying, oh, it's Biden's economy or Democrats' fault. Republicans have been in charge for a year. Prices are up, consumer confidence is down, and allies don't trust us, and our adversaries are laughing at us, and our country is more divided than ever before. And this Republican Congress has not only failed to meet the moment, it has been a complete, total, embarrassing failure on all counts. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. And now welcome our first panel, Representative Stauber. This is the second time I've seen him today. And Representative Randall from the Committee on Natural Resources. Your full statement will be submitted for the record. We ask that you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Representative Stauber, I welcome your testimony.
Thank you very much. Getting back to the topic at hand here in the rules, Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to testify on H.J.Res 140 to disapprove of Public Land Order 7917 in accordance with the Congressional Review Act. The data is clear. Demand for critical minerals is projected to skyrocket in the coming years, and we must be ready to meet the need. According to a recent study from S&P Global, global copper demand alone is projected to increase 50% by 2040, driven by the growing needs of artificial intelligence, defense, and manufacturing. This surge could cause a shortfall of up to 10 million metric tons of copper without a meaningful expansion in supply. In other words, we need to mine more, and we should have started yesterday. Our critical mineral dependency plays right into the hands of our adversaries. Most notably, China controls approximately 60% of global critical mineral production, 90% of processing, and 75% of manufacturing. We've repeatedly seen the CCP implement mineral export restrictions and leverage its stranglehold over critical and rare earth minerals as a bargaining chip in trade negotiations. Unfortunately, under the Biden administration, the United States moved in the opposite direction, reversing project approvals and restricting mineral development on millions of acres of public lands. H.J.Res 140 reverses a dangerous public land order, or PLO, finalized during the Biden administration. The PLO withdrew 225,504 acres, that's nearly 250,000 acres, in the Superior National Forest for mineral development for 20 years, where I will note the Forest Service plan states mining and timber harvesting are desired activities. The Biden administration even went so far as to state that its purpose in issuing the withdrawal was to prevent mineral and geothermal exploration and development. And when former Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland testified to Congress following the withdrawal, she said, quote, "I didn't think there were any critical minerals in there." End quote. The former secretary and the Biden administration either clearly did not do their work or they simply chose to ignore the facts, as this withdrawal area includes the Duluth Complex, the largest untapped copper nickel find in the entire world. The Duluth Complex contains 1/3 of our country's copper reserves, 95% of our nickel reserves, and 88% of our cobalt reserves, and 75% of our other platinum group resources. Again, Secretary Haaland, whose signature is on PLO 7917, testified to Congress that she didn't think there were critical minerals there when she took this action. Under the Federal Lands Policy Management Act, the Department of Interior is required to notify Congress of public land orders impacting an excess of 5,000 acres. The Biden administration failed to properly transmit PLO 7917 to Congress when it was finalized in January of 2023. Public Land Order 7917 implemented a broad policy that hinders access to American resources and is wholly detrimental to our nation's national and mineral security. It is exactly the kind of action Congress intended to review the CRA. The withdrawal substantially affects private companies and local economies by foreclosing leasing opportunities qualifying as substantive rule under the Administrative Procedure Act and the CRA. Disapproving PLO 7917 is also consistent with previous GAO opinions that large-scale land use withdrawals or management plan closing areas to leasing are rules, thereby subject to CRA submission and review. PLO 7917 should have been submitted to Congress under the CRA as a covered rule, allowing for the congressional review. The intent of the Biden administration's actions is shocking given our nation's dangerous dependency on foreign mineral supply chains. We have a growing vulnerability that our adversaries, particularly China, have already shown themselves happy to exploit by withholding supplies that are crucial for our national and our energy security. But this withdrawal does not only impact our access to critical minerals. Madam Chair, this area is also home to helium, a gas that the United States is largely reliant on foreign imports for. Recent discoveries in the area have found one of the largest and most concentrated helium deposits in the entire world. But when a developer tried to nominate acreage for a BLM lease sale, the request was denied because of this mineral withdrawal. Since we can't responsibly develop these resources in northern Minnesota under these bans, our country will continue to become increasingly reliant on imports from countries like Qatar and Algeria, all the while Russia's shares of the global helium market continues to grow. It is abundantly clear Congress must act to overturn PLO 7917 to secure our mineral security and allow the United States to compete in the 21st century. I urge the committee to adopt an appropriate rule so we can bring this resolution to the floor, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Stauber. Ms. Randall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Fox, Ranking Member McGovern. I'm here to testify today in strong opposition to House Joint Resolution 140, not just for the danger that it poses to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, our country's most visited wilderness area, but also for the outrageous abuse and expansion of the Congressional Review Act that this legislation represents. First, let's talk about what's at stake. The Boundary Waters in northeastern Minnesota is a pristine wilderness. It's a treasure beloved by countless Americans and is the most visited wilderness area in the country. And for good reason. Its breathtaking landscapes, crystal clear waters, and abundant wildlife make it a haven for outdoor recreation, a sanctuary for endangered species, and a refuge for those who are seeking solace in nature. But it's not just luck that has kept these waters clean. The Boundary Waters has more than a century-long history of protection. Through treaties with Canada in 1909 and later the Wilderness Act of 1964, our country has long recognized the importance of preserving this special place. And since time immemorial, the Chippewa or Ojibwe people have stewarded the land and waters and continue to gather, hunt, fish, and harvest in and around these areas. The Boundary Waters support a thriving outdoor recreation economy with hundreds of thousands of annual visitors and thousands of jobs across northeastern Minnesota. For years, this wilderness area has been under threat from a highly controversial foreign-owned mining project. But the science is clear. If the proposed mine were built in the watershed, not in the waters, in the watershed, the damage to the Boundary Waters from pollution would be certain and irreversible. That's why in 2023, then Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, protected the land surrounding Boundary Waters from mining for 20 years through Public Land Order 7917. House Joint Resolution 140 would overturn that public land order, also known as a withdrawal, and because of the nature of the resolution, it would prevent any future administration from enacting similar protections ever. This would pave the way for toxic mining that would pollute the region's water supply and permanently destroy a treasured place. But this resolution doesn't just have consequences for the boundary waters. Its impact is far-reaching for the future of public lands management and is a demonstration of Republicans' absolute overreach of the Congressional Review Act. The CRA has been used to overturn rules finalized by administrations of both parties since it was signed into law in 1996. But this Congress, the Trump administration, and Republican members of Congress have been using the CRA to overturn public land protections that have never before been considered rules by any administration. These actions are unprecedented and will, without a doubt, cause chaos and invite lengthy and costly litigation. Today's CRA resolution goes even a step further. The Government Accountability Office has not ruled that Public Land Order 7917 is a rule subject to the CRA. The Department of Interior has never before considered these public land orders to be rules subject to the CRA. Although Congress received a new notice of this public land order of the CRA, referencing the CRA January 6, 2026, Congress did originally receive notice of the order January 23rd, 2023, 3 years ago. The bill sponsor had ample formal notice and opportunity to inquire about the applicability of the CRA, but he did not. This backdoor, after-the-fact attempt to undo a public land order cannot withstand any scrutiny and sets a dangerous precedent for other beloved protected public lands across our country. I don't expect my colleagues from Minnesota to appreciate a non-Minnesotan defending boundary waters so vehemently, but it is also deeply unpopular in Minnesota and does not put American critical mineral security first. Over 2/3 of Minnesotans statewide say that permanent protection for the boundary waters should be a very high priority. By a 2-to-1 margin, Minnesotans oppose mining in the boundary waters watershed. Of course, proponents of this bill will argue that the country needs the mineral resources that the region has to offer. While our mineral security is a serious issue, my understanding is that the Chilean owners of this mine have close ties to some of our adversaries and have not shown any evidence that the minerals extracted here would stay in the United States and benefit our economy. At the end of the day, some places are worth protecting. This is one of them. I strongly oppose House Joint Resolution 140, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I yield back.
Mr. Stauber, I know you're one of the more solid and thoughtful members here. Would you like to respond to any of the accusations that were made?
Thank you very much. I want to be very clear to this committee and my friend and colleague. We are not mining in the boundary waters. That was settled in 1978 when Congressman Jim Oberstar was a member of Congress. We're not mining in the boundary waters, and we're not mining in the buffer zone. Congressman Oberstar back then said, okay, if you're going to make this wilderness, do not take the opportunity to timber harvest and mine outside of this area. He was way ahead of his game all those years ago. The opportunity that we have that presents itself, this Congressional Review Act does not greenlight any mining. It reverses the mineral ban of 225,504 acres to allow companies to compete that will follow the federal environmental and labor standards and our strict water standards in Minnesota. It will follow NEPA, exceed NEPA, the Clean Water and Clean Air Act, including the Endangered Species Act.
Madam Chair, I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Mr. McGovern.
Well, thank you. To be honest with you, it gives me a little comfort to say that this administration will follow federal environmental and labor standards. I didn't know that there were any left after they took office. But Ms. Randall, I don't know if you want to respond to anything.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member McGovern. I do. And to your first point, yes, we have seen as members of the Natural Resources Committee and members of full Congress, the erosion of our natural resources protections, our environmental protections under the Natural Resources Committee in just the last 12 months alone. We have seen speedy erosion of protections that have been long and hard fought for. I want to talk about the difference between mining in the waters, which I articulated during my testimony, and the watershed. I think it is willfully misleading to say that just because the mining isn't happening in the boundary waters, that it has no impact on the waters. We serve on the Natural Resources Committee. We talk a lot about watershed management. And, you know, as someone who comes from Washington State, where we have very special salmon, I think there are important fish in Minnesota too, we know that pollution in the watershed has impact in the waters that we are trying to protect. And to pretend otherwise, I think is, frankly, a bit of a misdirection with respect. It is important that we preserve this special place, and allowing for the incredibly toxic impact of this particular type of mine will degrade our ability to protect this watershed. And, you know, I'll say we have learned many lessons since the 1970s on buffer zones, riparian habitat, watershed management. The science continues, as long as we fund science, to evolve, and we should learn those lessons and not say, oh, we did as much as we could in 1978, we're done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I don't like the process, and I don't like the substance of what is happening here, and, you know, it's kind of the same old, same old. I mean, you know, exploiting protected lands, and somebody's going to get really rich, and there's going to be a lot of permanent damage. But having said all that, I thank you both for being here, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Griffith? No question. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you, and you both have talked about what was concerning me with this bill, which is that it does appear that we're talking about mining, not maybe specifically within the boundary waters area, but adjacent to it enough, and that's in fact why we have this regulation, because scientific study and consultation with all the relevant parties produced a regulation that said, no, we need to go forward with this regulation in order to protect the letter and spirit of the environmental preservation that we're trying to do. And of course, it's not just preserving this special fragile environmental area, but it's also the millions of dollars of revenue that comes to the state from tourism, both from across the country and across the border and from many other places. I guess I'm also concerned, Representative Randall, you just mentioned, you know, the science continues to evolve, and it's not static since the 1970s, and so there are new considerations, particularly within the watershed. If we were to approve this repeal by CRA process, it then blocks any future administration from taking action with respect to protection of this property. So I guess I'm both concerned by the fact that, as you said, it's a bit of a misdirection to say, oh no, it's 5 miles outside that this foreign company is going to be mining minerals for their corporate benefit, not for Americans, and that we're not going to be able to address the harm for many, many years after. Can you speak to that?
Thank you so much, Representative Scanlon. This is the real concern. I think in addition to protecting this special, unique place with, as you mentioned, significant tourism economy that benefits the state and, you know, our country, setting the precedent that we will repeal an order like this and block any future regulation, any future protection, any future preservation is really terrifying to me. We say, like, we don't accept any new science. We don't like the way this happened. We don't like that we can't ensure that this foreign company is going to get rich because they maybe have spent $500,000 in lobbying in the last year. And never again can we learn from the ability, from new science. Never again will we learn how we might preserve and protect this place further. Never can we say, oh, it turns out the Democrats were right, the pollution was terrible, let's do something different. But no, we won't be able to, because the way this resolution is written doesn't allow us to do any further regulation.
Less concerned with the Democrats being right than the scientists. And when you have a regulation, there's this whole process that talks to everyone in the community, including the folks that run the campgrounds and the fishing spots and everything. The regulatory process got input from all of those people, and most importantly, from the scientists. I mean, I think it's important. I suspect the fishing camps think their input is important as well. But so the regulatory process was done with all of that input. And then, as you noted, on the other side, we've got this foreign corporation that's dumping a lot of money into lobbying. It's a particularly swampy kind of DC thing where all that work of putting together regulation, soliciting public comment, looking at the various affected interests, is then going to be swept away without a similar process. And in fact, will block the ability of folks who are interested, all the stakeholders, to take action for the foreseeable future. So I think it's a poor use of our time. I think it's a bit of a fraud on the public who's going to be most impacted, and I would oppose it. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Jack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank both members for testifying before us today. If I could just start off with Mr. Stauber, I'm just curious, Cook, Lake, St. Louis counties, are you the only member of Congress who represents those three counties?
Yes.
So the people of those three counties elected you to be their voice here in Congress. You're bringing this to the Rules Committee and bringing this to your colleagues to solve for them. So I think the people of Minnesota are best positioned to make this decision, and I applaud you for bringing it before us. I'm curious, first and foremost, as you may know, a Congressional Review Act, the passage of a CRA earlier this Congress very much benefited my district and helped save about 200 jobs from a regulation that was going to close down a factory in my district. But I'm curious if I could ask you, what would happen if we don't do this? And if we do this, could you walk us through how your district and frankly the country will benefit because of it?
So if this Congressional Review Act does not pass, Representative Jack, we will not be able to harness those minerals. Again, the biggest copper nickel deposit in the world. And by the way, Minnesota has been mining iron ore for 145 years. In northern Minnesota, we know how to mine. And one of the things you talked about was the economic value. I have to tell you that there's 2,200 direct and indirect jobs from just one potential mine at an annual salary of about $90,000 compared to a tourism salary, a seasonal tourism salary, about $21,000 or $20,000. I just want to make sure that my friends and colleagues here understand that in Minnesota, we say it's better in our backyard because we do it better than anybody else. I do not want the United States of America purchasing any minerals that are mined by child slave labor. Right now, 1/3 of the cobalt used across the world is mined by child slave labor. Mr. Jack, I will tell you that the unions and many of my friends and colleagues support this. NAB2, the National Association of Building Trades Union, supports it. The operating engineers support it. The Teamsters support it, and the Iron Range Building and Construction Trades support it. When this mine moves forward, reference Twin Metals, it will bring $3 million of work, all union jobs, project labor agreements. It's going to be all union, and I think that we forget that this is an opportunity. We're going to need these minerals. We need to get them domestically, mine them domestically. And I will share with my friend and colleague from Washington, in Ontario, Canada, about 41 miles north of this, there's a gold mine, the Rainy River Gold Mine in Ontario, Canada. It was permitted in 2017, and it took 3 years to permit. And there's been no problems. It's an open pit mine in the same watershed. So we can do it using 21st century technology, Mr. Jack. Minnesota can not only lead the United States, but it can lead the world in domestic mining, doing it safely, following the labor and environmental standards that we demand.
Well, you've built a strong coalition in support of this, which is a testament to how effectively you legislate. I'm just curious, as you all know, under the Federal Lands Policy and Management Act, the Department of Interior is required to notify Congress of public land orders impacting in excess of 5,000 acres. For some reason, the Biden administration failed to properly transmit PLO 7917 to Congress in January 2023. Might you be able to speculate as to why you think that happened?
I can't speculate why they didn't convey the withdrawal, the PLO, to Congress. I can't speculate. All I can say is I don't believe they used science in the determination. The reason I say that is former Secretary of Interior, Representative Haaland, stated she didn't, quote, think there were minerals in there. And again, it's the biggest copper nickel find in the world. So there was political science, not the truth, and factual science in the data.
Well, thank you very much for both of your testimony, and I yield back, Madam Chairwoman.
Madam Chair, I'd like to submit for the record the letter. Is it the process
Without
here?
objection.
Okay, thank you. This is a letter
But
to
we'll submit it for the record.
the Honorable Pete
Thank you.
Stauber dated 2023 from Deb Hall.
Thank you. Mr. Langworthy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Representative Stauber, these minerals are essential to modern manufacturing, modern transportation, and our energy storage. Instead of allowing transparent, regulated permitting processes to move forward, the previous administration arbitrarily locked these resources away and made our nation even more dependent on foreign adversaries like China that are exploiting child labor throughout the world to get those much-needed minerals. That decision did not just undermine our supply chains, it directly threatened good-paying union jobs, as you pointed out. Our local school districts, I'm sure in your district, have been affected, and public services that depend on responsible development. Mr. Stauber, we have heard claims that the resolution before us threatens the environment and ignores conservation concerns. Can you clarify how H.J.Res 140 instead brings us balance and accountability?
Mr. Langworthy, the resolution simply overturns the illegal withdrawal. Any mine plan or helium company that wishes to extract those minerals, they have to follow the current standards. They have to meet or exceed the standards. We demand that in Minnesota. Not only do we have strict water standards in the state of Minnesota, but federally, it's got to follow NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, Clean Water and Clean Air Act. There's no cutting of the corners. Again, this is better in our backyard. We know how to do it. We have the resources, we have the workforce to do it.
Very good. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. I look forward to voting for it here in committee and also on the floor. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Langworthy. And passing on, asking my questions at the beginning was very efficient because my colleagues asked some of the same questions. But I do want to state what I understood you to say, Mr. Stauber. If there's any mining to be done, mines would be subject to the myriad of federal and state regulations that exist now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
It does not greenlight any mining.
good. I wanted to make that. I thought you had made it clear, but I wanted to make it abundantly clear. And it's my understanding that copper and nickel are critical to winning the energy development race in this century, including battery storage needed for renewables. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. And I now recognize Ms. Leisure Fernandez, who got in right under the wire.
Well, I need to tell you, if United would just not sort of hang out on the tarmac for so long, I would have made it here earlier. Thank you so much for coming in, Representative Stauber and Representative Emily Randall. I think this might be your first time testifying on a bill before rules, and so welcome. I think Representative Stauber has been here before. So, you know, when I look at this bill and think about the boundary waters, I've spent a lot of time looking at those boundary waters and imagining what it would be like to take a family vacation there. In fact, we wanted to go there as a family vacation this last summer, but it is packed. Like, you cannot get a reservation. That is how amazing this place is. And it employs thousands of people, benefit from the wilderness and from the boundary waters and getting out on that water and being in connection with nature. And we all know that when Americans and anybody from the world are able to step into nature and feel the beauty and the awe, A-W-E, of nature. And looking out at the Natural Resources Committee members, and they know what it's like because they have gone to those kinds of places. And they have experienced the awe of places that are so beautiful that you recognize how insignificant you are and how connected at the same time you are to the world around you because of those beautiful places. So it strikes me as scary as all get out, the idea that we might allow mining in the boundary waters in a way that would directly impact the economy, directly impact fishing. And I know you've probably already addressed it, but how many jobs, Representative Stauber, are associated with the tourism and the fishing that comes out of the boundary waters?
If I may, I'll get to that question. Can I make a comment of what you just said?
Yeah, but
Okay,
do you know?
first up, Representative Ledger Fernandez, I will tell you that you started out saying that you've looked at the boundary waters, you've seen pictures. You're speaking to somebody that has recreated there, camped there, fished there, canoed there, and I do it on an annual basis. So, but I will tell you that, Representative, you made the comment that they're mining in the boundary waters. I think you missed my statement. There's no mining in the boundary waters or the buffer zone.
At the outside of the boundary waters, but the question was, because I think that's the thing, is we all know how water flows, right? Water flows.
Yep.
And so if you harm water that is flowing into the boundary waters, you're going to have a negative impact on the boundary waters. My question was, do you know how many jobs could potentially be impacted from mining in the boundary waters if there was a spill? But just tell me, how many people are employed in the tourism industry related to the boundary waters?
From one proposed mine, they estimate 2,200 direct and indirect jobs. The mining jobs themselves.
Oh, that's the mining jobs. No, I'm asking, so 2,200, Representative, so he said 2,200 potential jobs for mining. Representative Emily Randall, do you know how many jobs could be lost because of the mining in the boundary waters related to tourism? I've seen an effort. Do you have it right at hand?
So I don't have the job number, but I do have some interesting dollar amounts as comparison. The outdoor recreation industry contributes $13.5 billion to Minnesota's economy compared to $1.2 billion from extractive industries. So Mr. Stauber did share some different average salaries on mining as compared to recreation, but I think the sheer scale of $13.5 billion of recreation as compared to $1.2 billion from extractive industries is really illustrative.
Yeah, I've seen an economic impact analysis by Harvard University, which, Madam Chair, I can enter into the record, and this is slightly old, but it tells you, we all know that industry jobs in this area have grown, has 6,600 jobs. And I could enter into the record the Harvard University Department of Economics, U.S. Forest Service Environmental Assessment on mineral leasing, withdrawal, and Superior National Forest.
Without objection.
Yeah, so this is stuff that's like some good research. That's a lot of jobs. And the other thing that strikes me about this is this mining company. Mr. Stauber, is this an American mining company? Who owns this mining company? Not the name and the small subsidiary, but who actually owns this mining company?
I think you know the answer. It's not an American company.
It's not an American company. It's a Chilean company. And do you happen to know where that Chilean company gets most of its copper smelted, is that the right word?
Copper what?
Smelted.
Smelted,
So
yeah.
when this copper is pulled out of the ground, where is it like, it's going to get put on a boat, and where is that boat going to end up?
Unfortunately, overseas, and with your help, we'll have more processing and smelting in the United States.
But right now, it's going to end up in China. Where is it going to end up, Mr.
We're gonna
Stauber?
fix that.
Where is it going to end up?
Overseas somewhere.
Overseas somewhere.
Oh,
Where does,
I'd rather have it in North America.
we
And I
all
think
would, we all would, but right now.
With your help, we'll get it in North America.
Okay, do you just can't bring yourself to say it's going to end up in China?
Well, North America.
That is where the foreign mining company smelts its copper. So we're going to potentially do great environmental damage. If they do one little mistake, it's going to harm this precious resource of water. And this is a resource that belongs to the American people. And where it's going to end up is on a boat in China. Because that's where the company that owns this does its smelting. So that's it. So, and with that, Madam Chair, as she drinks her very clean water, and that's what we're trying to do here, is fight back against potential mining that could harm the clean waters of this area. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. I do not believe there's anyone else that wishes to ask the witnesses any questions. So with that, you're excused. Thank you very much. I now welcome our second panel, Chairman Wahlberg and Ranking Member Scott from the Committee on Education and the Workforce. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Wahlberg, I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and Ranking Member, Committee, it's good to be in front of you again. The Pregnant Students' Rights Act addresses a simple but serious problem. Too many pregnant students don't know what support is available to them. That's the problem. Under Title IX, pregnant students are entitled to reasonable accommodations such as excused absences for medical appointments and childbirth. But too often, students are given incorrect or incomplete information about their rights. The Pregnant Students' Rights Act would change this. It requires colleges and universities to clearly inform students of their rights under Title IX and to provide a list of on-campus and community resources that can help expectant mothers through pregnancy, childbirth, and parenting without forcing them to put their education on hold. It also explains how students can file a Title IX complaint with the Department of Education or with their school if they believe they've been discriminated against because of pregnancy. Colleges and universities have a responsibility to ensure that every pregnant student feels supported in continuing her education. With the annual March for Life in our nation's capital this week, I'm proud to champion this bill to support pregnant students and their children. I'd like to thank the sponsor of the bill, Representative Ashley Hinson, for her leadership on this issue for the third consecutive Congress. I urge my colleagues to support this common sense bill, and I certainly welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wahlberg, for being so efficient. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member McGovern, Today we're considering, and members of the committee, today we're considering H.R. 6359, the Pregnant Students' Rights Act. This bill requires schools to provide pregnant students with information about on-campus and community resources, as well as their right to accommodations to assist them in carrying a baby to term while they're pursuing their education. While this bill on its face may appear helpful, upon further inspection, it is far from innocuous. In 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and triggered a series of state-sanctioned bans on abortion, which have created a complicated web of legal challenges for health providers and patients seeking comprehensive reproductive care, which can differ significantly depending on which state you live in. What's worse, health care for pregnant women has significantly declined as a result of state abortion bans. In Texas, for example, after the state banned abortion in 2021, pregnancy became far more dangerous. ProPublica found the rate of sepsis shot up more than 50% for women hospitalized when they lost their pregnancies in a second trimester. They also published data that adds empirical weight to the mounting evidence that abortion bans have made the common experience of miscarriage, which occurs in up to 30% of pregnancies, far more dangerous. Now the House Republicans want to limit students' access to information about available resources, including information on their right to receive accommodations and protections under federal civil rights laws available to pregnant or parenting women on college campuses. Instead of sharing unbiased and comprehensive information, this bill requires colleges and universities to distribute only partial information about students' existing rights under Title IX, as well as selective information on resources that solely encourage students to carry a pregnancy to term. Furthermore, it provides no information about rights and accommodations for students who, for example, want to bring a pregnancy to term, but because of medical complications, an abortion may be medically necessary. Pregnant students already face numerous challenges on campus, including managing stress and other mental health needs, dealing with financial and food insecurity, managing academic difficulties, just to name a few, and by requiring institutions of higher education to only share information that encourages students to carry a pregnancy to term, pregnant students are deprived of resources and information to help them make informed decisions. As a result, by keeping students in the dark about their rights and available health resources, the bill could unduly endanger the health of both the student and the baby. For example, this legislation fails to require schools to inform students about contraception, which could help students avoid unplanned pregnancies, their full rights under existing civil rights laws, resources for those who experience a miscarriage, information about medical resources available which might be necessary for high-risk pregnancies, or vital information about resources if a decision to terminate a pregnancy becomes medically indicated. Women should have access to this information so they can make informed decisions. By shielding students from health care information, resources, and rights that are available to them, Republicans are denying them the ability to choose what is best for them and their families. Moreover, the bill fails to provide pregnant and parenting students with any rights or resources which might actually help them, such as child care assistance or available health care. Additionally, if a student decides to carry a baby to term, the bill will not even require the provision of basic information about how to sign up for Medicaid, SNAP, or WIC. Lastly, this legislation requires colleges to provide information about how a pregnant student can file a complaint with the Department of Education if the school violates the rights under Title IX. This is particularly insulting, considering the fact that the Trump administration, in their efforts to dismantle the department, has already fired over half the staff and closed 7 regional offices of the Office of Civil Rights, which is the agency responsible for enforcing the pregnant students' rights under Title IX. Requiring schools to provide pregnant students with information and resources that are in fact being cut and rights that may not be enforceable is not a serious proposal. For these reasons, Madam Chair, I oppose the legislation and encourage my colleagues to do the same. Yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott from Georgia, I'll defer my questions and recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions. I do want to offer Chairman Wahlberg the opportunity to answer or to make any additional comments that he may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGovern.
I'm going to give
I'm sorry. I thought,
Mr. Wahlberg the opportunity.
I'm sorry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Scott. You know, I think I made a fairly clear statement in the simplicity of my statement. We are reinforcing Title IX, not supplementing it, not changing it, not altering it, making sure that it is carried out, and students, specifically pregnant students or students that are beginning their parenthood, understand what is available to them under Title IX. And that is a neutral position that takes care of any student in any condition relative to pregnancy. It does not prohibit schools from going beyond what is being, by law, carried out in Title IX. So our concern is that in many cases there's been a frustration of pregnant students in being discriminated against, in not being told the rights that they have, the resources that they have, as well as the law that gives them the information necessary so they can stay as a student. And classes and structure can be developed to meet their needs as opposed to letting them hang on their own and ultimately drop out of school.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions, but I would hardly call this bill a neutral bill, because I think it is a continuation of what we see as the Republican agenda, anti-woman, anti-abortion agenda that this majority has been pushing since you won control of the House, and this is what this White House is pushing. And this bill cherry picks the students it serves, and cherry picks the type of information being disseminated. I don't, and we're dealing with another, anti-abortion bill, I think, in another panel coming up on this, in this hearing. But, unless there's something you want to add, Mr. Scott.
I think you're absolutely right, but on cherry picking the information, a lot of information may not be given. We know that when the information isn't there, it can become dangerous. We know that some of these bills that have passed in other states result directly in the death of women as they do not qualify under their laws for an abortion that's medically indicated. And there have been documented cases where women have died. And people, legislators voted for that legislation that created that result. So to withhold information that may be crucial to a pregnant woman's life, I think is just reprehensible. And this only provides for information for those carrying the term, not for those who may be in a situation where the medical indication is that an abortion may be necessary.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and again, I'm going to just repeat what I said at the very beginning of this hearing, is that my Republican friends deliberately stalled any action on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and millions of people are now either paying double or triple for their insurance bills, or many of them opted out of getting health insurance this year. Grocery prices are through the roof, and my Republican friends cut SNAP by $200 billion. Medicaid cut by $1 trillion in the big ugly bill. I mean, I go on and on and on. I mean, when I did a town hall last week in my district, and this is not what people were talking about. They were talking about, their utility bills. They were talking about their grocery bills. They were talking about, just, the healthcare crisis. And so I think we just have a different set of priorities. But I appreciate both of you being here, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Griffith. Thank you. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. I would associate myself with the remarks of the ranking member. I have a lot of concerns about kind of pushing out some government propaganda to our pregnant and parenting students. But I'm also really concerned that this is a bill that would do absolutely nothing because it relies upon people filing complaints with the Office of Civil Rights of the Department of Education, which this administration completely gutted last year, firing hundreds of OCR employees, closing multiple offices. At this time, there is a 25,000 complaint backlog at OCR, and there are over 7,000 open investigations. And amidst that chaos, the entire department has only resolved 165 complaints. So, you know, if the remedy is to get more people to file OCR complaints, you've completely gutted that system, both with the doging of the department last year by the administration and then endorsing that in appropriations efforts since then. Is there anything you want to say about that, Mr. Scott?
It's hard to imagine how you can be filing a complaint with an agency that's in the process of being dismantled and think that's a credible process.
Yeah, I mean, I spent years working with students with disabilities, and we really relied upon OCR for students with disabilities, students who were being discriminated against for a range of issues, and to see that department gutted in this way, rendered completely ineffective, and then hear people saying, oh, well, we'll just send them some more work, is really kind of offensive. So thank you for your testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Langworthy, you're recognized.
Chairman Wahlberg, can you speak to why ensuring clear communication of existing rights and resources is an important step in supporting pregnant students and preventing discrimination on campus?
Well, yeah, I can speak to that, and thanks for the question. We know that 74% of students that deal with dropping out of school and contend with issues that inhibit their successful attainder of a degree in school are pregnant mothers. We know that there are numerous illustrations of young women who have become pregnant by choice or not planned, that now have a challenge in what they're going to do to keep in the school classroom. We know that Title IX indicates that they are deserving of all rights of any student, and accommodations must be made in Title IX, names it out, for pregnancy or related issues. That could include miscarriage, that could include even abortion. I'm sad to say, as a pro-lifer, but it could include that. And students who are caught in a situation where the expectancy of a birth of a child is causing significant challenges, disruptions, as well as changes in scheduling needs, need to know that they have the law behind them in Title IX, and the schools must involve themselves with making a need. This does one thing very significant. It makes it very clear in the student handbook. The students must be informed at least once a year about all the provisions available to them as a pregnant student. It must allow for accommodations, even in scheduling, allow for missed classes, and the ability to make up classes and make up tests if necessary. All of that's available, and it also provides all of the list of the resources available for a pregnant mother. That includes medical services, contraceptive services, all of that's available. We have seen too many times when schools aren't doing that, and students are just left ultimately to drop out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The bill reflects a common sense approach to protecting students and expanding opportunity and ensuring that pregnancy does not derail a student's educational goals. I urge my colleagues to support this as well, and I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Langworthy. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chair. Chairman Walberg, I'm looking at the bill, and under Section 2, on line 20 and 21, do you have the bill in front of you? It says you can, it talks about how we need to provide information, Section 2, on the rights of and resources for, while you're looking at it, I'll just read it out loud. For pregnant students to carry a baby to term and students who may become pregnant while enrolled at such institution of higher education to carry a baby to term. If you turn to the next page, the resources on line 3 and 4, are you with me there?
I'm with you.
What does it say? A list of resources on campus and the community that exist to help a pregnant student? Why don't you read the end for me?
Carrying the baby to term and caring for the baby after birth.
So the problem I have with what you just answered in the questions of Mr. Langworthy is you acknowledge that pregnant students need to have information, and that information might include information about miscarriages, about access to abortion. The problem is your bill doesn't do that. Your bill is intended to provide information solely about carrying a baby to term. That's what happens when you read the bill. And the problem with this is that there are lots of different health outcomes and health resources that a woman and a student need. And it could be around a miscarriage because, as the ranking member pointed out, miscarriages are common. And look around the room. I mean, if you talk to any woman, so many of us have had miscarriages. And we need to know where to go when that happens if you're a student, because you're busy. And you might need a miscarriage, medical help, because women die from pregnancy. And that medical help from a miscarriage might require what would be termed medically an abortion, even though it was not. This does not provide that. So that's the problem, is this bill is sort of like saying, we want people to get information. I was trying to think of an analogy. It's like, you have cancer. We want you to know what your options are for cancer. We're only going to tell you about radiation. We're not going to tell you about chemotherapy. We're not going to tell you about immunotherapy. We're just going to limit it to what we think is best. And the problem with this bill and the other bills that restrict a woman's access to health care is that as politicians, and I notice there are two men sitting at the table, no offense to either one of you, one's defending a woman's right to have full reproductive access, and one's not. But that's the problem. We cannot have politicians basically putting the thumb and saying, we are going to provide women certain information about reproductive health care and not the rest. And that's my major problem with this bill and with the other bills like it. Ranking Member Scott, I'm the last Democrat who is on here. Is there anything else you want to add regarding this bill?
No, just to point out that there are legislators around the country who vote for bills that result in women's deaths. And maybe they don't intend it, maybe they don't know, maybe they hope it doesn't happen. But because of some of these bans, they're so restrictive that medical complications occur, and without all the information, they have documented deaths. So why would you limit the information for someone who might be in a situation with an abortion is medically indicated to preserve the woman's life or avoid serious health effects? This is, as you have pointed out, does not mandate that information be given. Other information can be given, but not that.
Right, and so you're going to now, what you're going to create is, well, they didn't give me information about this. So you're also then creating another cause of action, right? So Republicans with this bill are, one, depriving women, their students, of full range of reproductive health care resources that might be available for them, which is them interfering. I love the way they're constantly interfering. Like the party that's supposed to be about limited government is always about government interfering in the doctor's office of a pregnant woman. And this, they're doing it again. They're interfering yet again, and then creating potential for a lot more claims that they don't even want to handle because they are defunding, as my colleagues pointed out, the Office of Civil Rights, which would investigate any of these claims. It's just, it doesn't seem to accomplish much, especially not in this moment when there are so many other crises affecting the United States. And this is, you know, first it was showers, you know, and now it's interfering with women's reproductive health. The priorities of the Republican Congress baffle me. And with that, Madam Chair,
Could I
go back.
respond?
Yes,
Could I at least add some
Sure.
information? Our bill is very specific. It's encouraging pregnant students, women students, and making sure they understand what is available to them. We're not rewriting Title IX. And let me quote you from Title IX. As you've quoted from the bill, we've intended not to change Title IX or restrict Title IX in what it does for women. Just add the fact that women ought to be given full information on resources available to them. In Title IX, the regulations prohibit discrimination against students based on those students, and I quote, pregnancy and related conditions. Would a related condition be a miscarriage?
it could, and I think that, and it should be, you should not be discriminated against if you choose it, if you have a miscarriage. Miscarriages are not sought after. They are medically.
And that's what we want to get students to
It
understand.
could be abortion, but the problem is that you have a bill. You said we want people to have full information. If you wanted full information, you wouldn't limit it to carrying the baby to term. It would be full information regarding your options if you are pregnant, which include carrying the baby to term, abortion. I mean, they include other options, and you have excluded that from your bill. We just read it. So that's the problem with this bill, is you're choosing.
We stuck with Title IX. We're reaffirming Title IX for the students.
You're not reaffirming Title IX.
And that's not what is taking place on college campuses now. We're dealing with pregnant students.
Part of the reason it's not, Biden actually had a rule to make sure that there was better information, and Republicans have sued to block that. Representative Scott.
I think the chairman is right. You're entitled under Title IX to the full information. As you have pointed out, the bill only requires them to provide some of the information. And so the other information is left behind. They may be entitled to it, but unless they ask for it, they're not going to get it.
They're not going to get it. The bill speaks for itself. The fact that it stops there, could highlight it in yellow,
They still come under all of Title
stops
IX
there.
regulations.
but,
They still come under all of Title IX
but
regulations.
your bill stops. It has
We're
one
not-
option.
we're affirming Title
Your bill
IX.
has one option. And that option limits a woman's access, a student's access to the full
That may be your perspective.
options available to her when she becomes pregnant. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. Ms. Fishbach, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I just want to say that I think what this bill really does ensure that women have all of the information. They have the information about resources, they have information, because obviously the students during pregnancy and childbirth, they need to understand that there are resources available to them there on campus and in the community, and that's what's important about this, so that they understand. Because they, many times, particularly while they're undergoing, taking their education, they don't understand the help that they can get. And that's what we're about, is making sure that that they have the help that they need and that they know what's available to them. And I'm not 100% sure, but I may be the last person. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just ask if there's anything that you want to add. I know you had the opportunity, but just as, to finish up, because it's critical that women get the information about resources, not just about abortion, but about resources to help them through their pregnancy and childbirth and on into raising the child.
Representative Fishbach, I appreciate that question because it seems today there is no lack of information about abortion, about ways to terminate pregnancy, to the point now where we're having a declining population. We are concerned about, in this case, that we have women who are in college, university, preparing for a future. They want to do that, they have their goals and dreams, but they also have a child. And so often we've seen that there has not been full information given to them how you indeed can carry a child to term, you can become a parent, and you can be a student. We will applaud you for that. We'll work with you on it. There are other resources that will be available to you as well. We know that. That's there. But we want to make sure that, in this case, Title IX, which offers those resources, but often are not being carried out. Nearly 1 in 5 undergraduate students is raising children while enrolled. Of these student parents, 74% are mothers. Pregnant students often received incorrect guidance on how to navigate classes while pregnant, which produces all sorts of issues that discourage and cause them to take steps that they may not take otherwise if they felt they were supported. Some students feel pressure to drop out of school because they don't receive the proper accommodations. The Pregnant Students' Rights Act protects expectant mothers by ensuring they are aware of their rights and accommodations and resources available to help them stay enrolled in college. I think we need to support this. There are all sorts of resources available. We don't go into Title IX and by error leave something out or add something without anything else put in beside of it. We leave that in place, but make sure the students know what their rights are. But I must admit, I want them to know that it's a great thing to keep the child too, and we're going to work with them on that.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing the bill forward. And I appreciate that. We want to make sure that young women who are facing pregnancy during their education understand there are options out there. There are resources to help them through. So thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Fishbach. I don't have any questions of witnesses, but I want to thank Mr. Wahlberg for affirming that it is women who get pregnant. And this is not an anti-woman bill. This is a pro-woman bill. And I noticed you mentioned somewhere, one of your things I wrote down is continuing her education. So I think it's very refreshing that we can come to a meeting like this and affirm that it is women who get pregnant and women who are facing this decision. I think we on our side of the aisle know how to define a woman, and we know that it is women who bear children and are mothers. Thank you very much. Seeing no other persons wanting to ask questions, our witnesses are excused. I now welcome our third panel, Representative Adrian Smith and Representative Chu, who's been waiting patiently from the Committee on Ways and Means. Your full statement will be submitted for the record. We ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Representative Smith, I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Congresswoman Fishbach as well. I would like to thank Chairman Smith of our committee and Congresswoman Fishbach for introducing and advancing the important legislation we are here to consider today. Pregnancy resource centers play a vital role in empowering mothers and families to choose life. They provide everything from diapers, food, transportation, parenting skills classes, relationship education, and prenatal vitamins. In 2024, over 2,700 pregnancy resource centers across the country aided nearly 2 million individuals. Services and material assistance provided by pregnancy centers had an estimated value of over $452 million annually. Many states use temporary assistance for needy families, TANF funds, to support pregnancy centers, including my home state of Nebraska. Nebraska funds a crisis pregnancy program to promote childbirth and parenting. Flexibility for states to use TANF funds is at the very heart of the bipartisan law which created the block grant in 1996. In fact, the primary goal of the legislation was to increase flexibility for states. However, in 2023, the Biden administration published a proposed rule which singled out and targeted pregnancy centers and preemptively suggested states would no longer be able to use TANF to support them. The Biden rule was never finalized, but there is a need to ensure future administrations do not target and discriminate against pregnancy centers. The Supporting Pregnant and Parenting Women and Families Act is similar to a bill passed by the House in 2024, which would have blocked the Biden-era rule. H.R. 6945 amends the TANF statute to prohibit discrimination against pregnancy centers and clarifies that the use of TANF funds for pregnancy centers is allowable. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Chu, you're recognized.
Ms. Chair and Ranking Member McGovern, it is shameful that at a moment when millions of Americans are losing access to health care, the Rules Committee is meeting not to consider serious legislation that would help women and families, but to debate a bill that does absolutely nothing to make health care more affordable or accessible. It's equally shameful that legislation designed to score political points with attendees at this week's anti-abortion rally here in Washington, D.C., is being prioritized over addressing the very real health care crisis facing women and families across this country. This partisan Republican bill, H.R. 6945, would divert federal resources away from needy children and families and towards anti-abortion centers. The bill would amend temporary assistance for needy families, the law in order to block the federal government from monitoring state spending of TANF dollars for these centers. In effect, this bill would permanently exempt states from regulation and oversight of expenditures of federal TANF dollars on these centers. These so-called crisis pregnancy centers routinely masquerade as legitimate healthcare facilities while providing misleading or medically inaccurate information designed in order to prevent women from accessing abortion care. They frequently disguise themselves as real clinics, dressing staff in scrubs or white coats and deliberately misleading patients about who they are and what services they provide. This bill legitimizes coercive anti-abortion tactics designed to block people who are facing life-altering medical decisions from receiving truthful, medically accurate information about their reproductive health care options. And this bill is one more step towards Republicans' true objective: total control over Americans' private health care decisions and a nationwide abortion ban. In Iowa, an OBGYN has seen patients who visited these centers and were told that using contraceptives was the same as having an abortion. She's seen patients who've had miscarriages and ectopic pregnancies because they were misdiagnosed by these anti-abortion centers. These women were told that their pregnancies were in the early stages or they were experiencing normal amounts of pain because the staff members they saw were not actually qualified medical professionals. As a result of this substandard care, these women showed up to the hospital needing emergency care and surgery to save their lives. And in Chicago, a woman seeking an abortion was deliberately misled by a fake clinic, subjected to graphic videos, and was told that having an abortion would make her infertile. After giving birth, she lost her job and health coverage, and then the so-called clinic never offered real medical care or follow-up support. Because these centers are not actual medical facilities, they are not even subject to HIPAA's privacy and security protections. Their staff can spread misinformation without consequence, collect sensitive personal data under false pretenses, and face little to no accountability for the harm that they cause. In fact, a study of 607 anti-abortion centers across 9 states, nearly 2/3 of such centers nationwide, found that they promoted patently false or biased medical claims about pregnancy, abortion, contraception, and reproductive health care. Fewer than half reported having a licensed medical professional on staff. During our markup last week, Democrats offered a series of common sense amendments that would have allowed funding to these centers only if they could demonstrate that they actually provide medically accurate information or do not harm women's health or economic futures, or do not mislead or coerce patients. Committee Republicans rejected all these amendments, making clear that their purpose is coercive propaganda, not support for pregnant women and families. If you truly want to support parents and families, Democrats on the Ways and Means Committee would support the establishing of paid family and medical leave, making child care affordable for working families, or reversing the $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, our nation's largest insurer of children and births in this country. Instead, at a moment when millions of Americans are going without health care or paying exorbitant costs just to stay insured, this committee is debating a bill that does nothing to address these crises. This bill is merely an attempt to appease a far-right fringe group in town for its annual conference. The best thing we can do is to support pregnant women and families today, and we can do that by rejecting this legislation. With that, I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Mr. Smith, would you like to respond to any of the comments that have just been made?
Yes. In the interest of time, I'll say that the pregnancy centers have to abide by standards such as it's illegal to practice medicine without a license. So laws across the 50 states are very clear about that. I can't
Do
speak.
they have liability exemptions if they violate the law?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to my knowledge either.
Right. So there are clear standards. It's called the Commitment of Care and Competence that is created by Heartbeat International that sets an ethical code. And my limited experience in dialogue with pregnancy centers, they're very careful to stay in their lane, as the saying might be, that they stick to what is appropriate in terms of health care and refer out to scenarios of serious medical need.
Well, I've been in several of these facilities, and I know that they care deeply about the women and the unborn children. And I'm a little taken back at the animosity towards them and the attacks that continue on them from the rabid groups on the far left. I mean, these men and women that have dedicated their lives to these facilities, and the health of those moms and those unborn children, I think, deserve a tremendous amount of credit, and I'm appreciative for them and the work that they do. And so I want to thank you and the author for bringing this legislation. And I think the assault on these clinics needs to stop.
I appreciate that, and I think it's important to note that I believe there's efforts on both sides of the aisle to help women and children in need. and utilizing TANF dollars for the purposes that pregnancy centers utilize TANF dollars in helping women and children in need is something we should celebrate and not attack.
I agree. Madam Chair, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congresswoman Chu mentioned a number of amendments that were offered in committee. And I've heard you over the years talk about your passion for rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse when it comes to how American taxpayer dollars are spent on healthcare programs. So I'm just trying to understand a couple of things here. So during your committee's markup on this bill, every Republican voted against an amendment offered by Congresswoman Del Bene aimed at combating fraud, abuse, and deceptive practices for women who are pregnant and seeking medical help. And the amendment, which has been resubmitted to the Rules Committee for consideration, would say that a crisis pregnancy center can no longer receive federal TANF funds if, quote, a state medical board has found that a pregnancy center has provided misleading or deceptive medical information, including information about a service offered by the pregnancy center, or put at risk the health of a woman, end quote. I mean, that's the plain text of the amendment. Why did every Republican in the Ways and Means Committee vote against that amendment, including you? I mean, it just seems pretty basic.
I would say that it was singling out crisis pregnancy centers or pregnancy centers in general, unfairly so,
Well, you guys-
with ambiguous language.
You guys single out organizations and, you know, in all kinds of areas. I mean, I'm just trying to say, what is objectionable about this language? You know, if a state medical board has found that a pregnancy center has provided misleading or deceptive medical information or put at risk the health of a woman, that it can't receive TANF funds. Do we want TANF funds going to centers that provide misleading information?
The language being what it has been is overly broad and vague in its nature. And I think I'm not convinced that the language actually strengthens the intent behind the bill. The intent was to undermine the bill.
Well, let me just share an experience of a woman in my district. I mentioned this in my opening remarks with one of these unregulated and misleading pregnancy centers. This is in Worcester, Massachusetts. I mean, they told her that she had a viable pregnancy, but when she continued to feel sharp pains, she went to a real doctor and was diagnosed with an ectopic pregnancy that threatened her life and resulted in her having to get an emergency surgery. She had all kinds of complications after that. If she had gotten actual medical care earlier, she could have gotten the treatment that she needed before it was too late. And again, let me just ask again, I mean, don't you think fake medical practices that are found to be misdiagnosing and threatening the health of pregnant women should not receive federal funds? I mean, this amendment is just about the pregnancy centers that are deceiving women or, you know, have put women's health at risk. I mean, don't you think that centers that have demonstrated that they're providing bad information or threatening the life of a woman should not be receiving TANF funds?
Well, that's actually not the point that is being debated necessarily, because it was the Biden administration that categorically denied pregnancy centers from using TANF dollars regardless.
But this amendment basically says, okay, TANF can provide funding, but here's the exception.
Well, there are already remedies for
So this woman sues them, or is that the exception? I mean, if you have a center...
Well, every state's probably going to be a little bit different, but the fact of the matter is there are remedies for that.
If the state medical examiner determines that, you know, this one particular center is providing deceptive information and information that, quite frankly, is endangering the life of women...
Every center must abide by the law.
Yeah, I don't understand, you know, why that was such a heavy lift, other than the fact that, again, that this is more of a kind of a messaging bill rather than actually trying to get this right. But I need to get to another topic here because we don't always have this opportunity. You know, you're also the chairman of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Trade, and just this past week, President Trump announced on True Social that he would be putting in place 10% tariffs on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland, and threatening future tariff increases with the explicit goal of coercing our NATO allies into letting the U.S. annex Greenland, which, by the way, does not want to be part of the United States. And one of the reasons that President Trump is pushing this takeover of Greenland is because he's upset he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, according to text that he sent to Norway's prime minister over the weekend. I mean, this is unbelievable. But in response, Republican Senator Murkowski said that these tariffs are, quote, unnecessary, punitive, and a profound mistake. Republican Senator Tillis said that these tariffs are, quote, bad for America, bad for American businesses, and bad for American allies. And it's great for Putin, Xi, and other adversaries who want to see NATO divided, end quote. Republican Congressman Don Bacon said, I quote, Congress must reclaim tariff authorities, end quote. Congressman Smith, do you support President Trump's actions to threaten and extort our NATO allies with tariffs? And do you think this is how an American president should treat our allies?
I wasn't expecting to have this discussion, but I'll, very briefly, so that we can cover the materials of the bill.
You're still the chairman of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Trade, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And I've been on the record for saying I'm not a fan of tariffs. I understand that the president is looking to tariffs as tools, as he has discussed, as he campaigned on, as he governed during his first term. A lot of opposition to the tariffs during his first term, and then when he did not return to the White House, very little, actually nothing was done to reverse those tariffs. So the president, I think, has made some progress on getting some other countries to the table. The UK would be an example, others as well. But I think moving forward, I hope we can look for ways to, in a bipartisan fashion, look for ways to level the playing field on international trade.
Would you support a measure to block those tariffs if it came up for an up or down vote in the House?
I would want to look at any language before I make any kind of a commitment. Look at the details.
So
Overall,
you don't think we should be able to vote up or down on these?
I would prefer to vote on tariffs, certainly.
And the reason why I ask is because the Senate has sent us, on a bipartisan basis, several joint resolutions to terminate some of Trump's tariffs. But in the House, the Republican majority has continued to turn off fast-track procedures 4 separate times that will allow up or down votes on these tariffs. And the last time this happened, back in September, several Republicans were so incensed and frustrated by the process that they held out and they struck a deal for a working group within the Republican conference to address the tariff issue. And one Republican member told news outlets that the tariff policy working group would be led by none other than you. But since these press releases, that's a while ago now, and news reports came out, I haven't heard anything about the working group. I mean, can you please update this committee on what your tariff working group has been up to? Specifically, like, who's on the working group?
Well, there have been a number of members interested in talking about trade policy moving forward and how we can effectively level the playing field, and including ways that we can address things in a longer-term fashion than one presidential administration at a time.
But it's been 4 months. I mean, do we have a formal list of people who are part of that group?
I don't have that, and I don't think it's relevant.
How many times have you met as a working group?
I don't keep track of the number of times that I have discussions with colleagues, but I think we've been having a productive conversation about how we level the playing field as it relates to international trade.
But has the working group formally met at all? I mean, it's been 4 months since the promise was made. I mean, is there a group of people on the working group, and I can't get an answer to that?
We've had trade discussions on the committee as well.
With the working group?
No, that's an ad hoc effort to have discussions among members, looking at how we can level the playing field on trade.
But again, I'm going back, to the promise that was made to Republican members that a working group would be established, that members would be part of that working group, and there would be meetings, and there would be, and I mean, there's been, I'm missing it. Have you published, or you plan to publish any reports on the findings? I mean, it seems like nothing happened. There was a promise made to get people to support a rule, and then, like, here we are 4 months later, and we don't have any formal membership to this working group. There's no meetings, and all you can say is that I've talked to members about trade informally, or we've brought up the issue of trade and Ways and Means, That seems a far cry from what was promised. That's all I'm trying to say.
That's your characterization. I would disagree with that, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I just want to know, is there a working group? Who are the members, and how many times have you met? That's it. I mean, those aren't trick questions. And if the answer is there's no members, and we haven't met, okay, I mean, I remember you did in 2022, when a Democrat was in the White House, you said, and I quote, "A successful trade agenda will require close cooperation with Congress every step of the way. This coordination is not optional." That's you. I mean, do you still believe that? I assume you do, right?
I do.
And can you credibly sit here and tell me that the Trump administration is coordinating with Congress on these tariffs and on this trade policy?
As I mentioned before, the president is using the tariffs as a tool, and I think
Is he coordinating with you guys?
he's been, I don't know if I'd say coordinated, but certainly made us aware of what is happening, and there's a lot taking place, and I think that's in stark contrast to the previous administration.
Yeah, I mean, did you help write Trump's tweet threatening our allies last night? I mean, is that the kind of, I mean, so I'm just, and I'll just close with this, Madam Chair. I mean, I'm just wanting, when are some of you guys who know better going to stand up against these crazy tariff policies that are raising costs at home and destroying our alliances? I mean, things are going up. The American people are paying for this. I hear when I do town halls and I meet with constituency groups, I know that there are many of you that know better on this. And unless Republicans are willing to actually stand up and take a stand against these tariffs and push back, this is going to continue. And you see what he's threatening right now. I mean, and we can't afford this. We can't afford this. And I thank the chair lady for her indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Griffith.
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask a question. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's part of Jefferson's manual's goal, Jefferson's manual of parliamentary practice and procedure, that we talk about the issues before us, and I understand the gentleman preceding me in the queue for questions is frustrated about national policies related to tariffs, but with tongue-in-cheek, I would ask my colleague, was there any discussion related to pregnancy centers and tariffs? And I know the answer is no.
That is correct.
And then the amendment you said was overly broad, and I haven't seen the actual language of the amendment, but I was listening to its recitation, and it said, if there was any indication that there would be harm to a woman or something of like ilk. And isn't it true that anybody who is providing any kind of pregnancy services, because pregnancy is something that can be dangerous, could give advice where they're giving good, sound, well-intentioned advice that leads to some kind of a problem just because that's the nature of pregnancy? Is that not accurate?
That would seem to be the case.
So if we applied that to all healthcare providers or all people who provide any information related to pregnancy, we could very easily, fairly quickly eliminate 40, 50, 60% of providers. Wouldn't that be fairly accurate or close?
I'm sure it would be a strong number.
It'd be a strong number because, look, the very best of medical people have to make judgment calls, and sometimes they're wrong. Isn't that true?
That is true, and that's why they carry liability insurance as well.
Yeah. And this is just trying to undo what was done in the previous administration that took the crisis pregnancy center locations that give advice or give information. Everyone is different, but that just says they're not automatically banned if a state wants to authorize them to receive money from this federal program. They can. Isn't that the way I read the
Right. They began the process to do that. They did not complete the process. But I can't emphasize enough that the effort was to categorically deny all pregnancy centers the use of TANF dollars, despite what an individual state would say, despite the fact that the federal government in 1996 established flexibility for states. And it was not an effort to single out perhaps some bad examples that perhaps may not even exist as well, but the fact of the matter is it was categorical and I think inappropriate when it's pretty easy to detect across America when there are individuals in need and that folks from across the political spectrum, reasonable folks from across the political spectrum, can usually come together and identify someone in need and how to help them.
Yeah, and I'm just reading, I'm looking at the bill, and it says on page 2, and I begin at line 2:1, in general, nothing in this part shall be construed to prohibit a state from using a grant made under Section 403 to support pregnancy centers. And I guess what's bothering me is that somehow there's this amendment that's supposed to be some kind of a magic elixir that then gives the state the right to pull it back. But if the state is involved in the process from the get-go, don't they already have control and each state can make their own decisions?
Effectively, yes. And I think looking at the debate we had in the markup and the statements that were made, that the amendments, actually plural, amendments were intended to undermine and not enhance.
I thank the gentleman. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for always pulling us back to Mr. Jefferson's manual. Ms. Scanlon.
Love the manual.
I first yield to the ranking member.
Yeah, I think Jefferson or anybody else who was president of this country would be horrified by the state of affairs right now. And the reason why I brought it up, to be honest with you, is because there's no other opportunity. I mean, the stuff that comes to the floor, quite frankly, in the scheme of things, is trivial compared to what people want us to be focused on. And I don't know, whether you talk to your constituents, but people are feeling the impact of these tariffs. And the threats of more tariffs, you saw the stock market today do a nosedive. This is serious stuff. And this president is out of control. And there's nobody here who wants to stand up and reel him in. I mean, if this were an elderly relative saying some of the stuff he's saying right now, I mean, you'd take the car keys away from him. I mean, this is out of control. And again, not only are you all circling the wagons around him, but you're going one step further. As I said, the Senate has sent us on a bipartisan basis several joint resolutions to terminate these tariffs, and you all, in this majority, have continued to turn off fast-track procedures 4 separate times that would allow up or down votes on these tariffs. If you think they're a good idea, vote for them. Vote for them. I think they're a bad idea. And I think there are a lot of Republicans that think they're a bad idea. But this game of, we can't vote, you're shutting off the procedures to allow us to have a vote. And I asked about a working group because that apparently was promised to Republicans in exchange for their votes last September. And what we learned here today is that there's no such working group. There's nobody on the working group. There's no reports on the working group. I mean, it was just another, empty press release. So that's why I brought it up, and I'm going to continue to bring it up, especially when we're not bringing serious legislation to the floor. And with all due respect, the stuff we're talking about here today, I mean, with all that's going on in this country, give me a break. This is the most important stuff. I mean, we have millions of people, seeing their health care premiums double and triple, and we can't even, extend the ACA tax credits. I mean, there's so much that needs to be done, and this is what we're doing. So yeah, I'm really concerned about these tariffs, and I'm concerned about the unhinged nature of some of this president's comments. I thank the gentlelady. I yield back.
Thank you. So this bill is called the Supporting Pregnant and Parenting Women and Families Act, and it has to do with the use of TANF funds, which are supposed to provide cash assistance to women and kids in poverty. It rings a little hollow that this majority is bringing up this bill in the wake of the big ugly bill that was passed this summer that dramatically cut support for pregnant and parenting women and children in poverty, with the huge cuts to Medicaid. When we have 40% of pregnancies in this country, the medical care is funded by Medicaid, and with the draconian cuts to SNAP and then the administration's illegal withholding of SNAP during the budget shutdown. So to say this is all about concern for families in need, it is disingenuous to not be profane. But it's not an isolated concern. We're not talking about one bad actor here or there. There has been a systemic abuse among these crisis pregnancy centers that we have seen. And I see the gentleman shaking his head. I would just ask unanimous consent to put into the record a study entitled Designed to Deceive, a study of the crisis pregnancy center industry in 9 states.
Without objection.
Thank you. I mean, one of the 9 states that was investigated, including the 607 of these pregnancy crisis centers that were investigated, was Pennsylvania, where I am. And as a result of this study and audits that were done in Pennsylvania of these centers, a determination was made that TANF dollars should not be steered to these places because basically public dollars were being siphoned off to promote an anti-abortion agenda, and it was not promoting food, diapers, support for pregnant and parenting women and families as intended, and I think, as we would all agree, should happen. But in fact, there were millions of Pennsylvania dollars, or dollars coming from federal through Pennsylvania, that were being sent to this corporate network and not even being used for families in Pennsylvania. So I think there are serious concerns about fraud, waste, and abuse among this network where public dollars are not being spent for the intended purpose. Is there anything that you want to comment with respect to this?
So I want to be utterly clear that this bill would take these TANF dollars and provide no accountability for what these crisis centers do. Right now, there are 10 states that do provide TANF dollars for these crisis pregnancy centers. But any entity that uses TANF dollars actually does have to undergo some accountability, some reporting, some oversight. But what this bill says is that there shall be no prohibition against TANF dollars being sent to a crisis pregnancy center. So a woman could die at a crisis pregnancy center, and there will be no ability to stop those funds from going to that center. That's what this bill does.
Well, and that speaks to the problem we had in Pennsylvania where there was money being sent to these centers, and the overarching agency refused to participate in a statewide audit. So it is about the accountability piece, making sure that taxpayer dollars that are supposed to address the needs of low-income families, and particularly children, that money actually gets to them and isn't diverted to some propaganda purposes or to agencies which multiple studies have found are systemically misrepresenting what they're doing, providing misleading medical information, et cetera. So thank you for your work on this, and I would yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Langworthy, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Smith, can you explain how H.R. 6945 preserves our state's authorities while ensuring that pregnant and parenting women continue to have access to meaningful support in their communities?
Well, the bill would prevent an administration in the future from very discriminatorily eliminating this category of users from using TANF dollars. And that discrimination, I think, stands in the way of reasonable people helping people in need. And again, I think it would be easy to detect people in need and the ability to help them. I've heard various arguments over the years in terms of why we should do that and the outcomes that can result. And so to narrow the scope and to actually uphold the intention behind TANF is what this, in my opinion, is one of the goals as well.
Very good. Thank you. This legislation reinforces state flexibility. It supports families in need and ensures assistance reaching women and children where it can make a real difference. So thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Langworthy. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm looking at the legislation and considering some of the questions and the arguments made. And it strikes me that the chair of the Subcommittee on Trade, who really didn't really want to talk about trade as much, but that the word was used, this is intended to not have them discriminate against pregnancy centers. But Representative Chu, that's not the issue. If the pregnancy center was actually offering services that complied with TANF, they could receive funds right now. Is that correct, Representative Chu? And can you explain the difference between allowing TANF funds to be used for their purpose to assist women and families who are in need, and this idea of just sending them off to pregnancy centers without any oversight?
Oversight is so essential for any entity that's funded by TANF. We want to make sure that they are going to low-income families, and states actually have flexibility in terms of how they use it. It could be for direct funds, or for job seeking, or for transportation, or childcare. But what we want to know is that these TANF funds are being used to help these families and not to harm them. And what we see are that far too many of these crisis pregnancy centers are actually harming women. They routinely delay access to legitimate medical care by presenting themselves as actual medical clinics while offering little or no medical services. More than half of them offer non-diagnostic ultrasounds, which are considered inappropriate. They're used for non-clinical purposes. And in fact, they can do a lot of harm because they lead a woman to believe that there's something actually truly medical going on here, when in reality, the people who are doing them have no training and no medical expertise. And then 2/3 of these centers disseminate medical misinformation, which cause patients to delay care, misunderstand their health status, or forego timely treatment. And so they are misusing TANF funds, but at least if they are going through the process as it stands now, there is accountability through the TANF process. But if this bill goes through, then it says nothing shall prohibit those funds, those TANF funds, from going to any crisis pregnancy center, even if a woman dies.
So to repeat, right now, a pregnancy center who does good work and works with the state and complies with regulations could get TANF funds. But what we don't want is to say there is no requirement, there is no possibility that state can regulate, can prevent it, they just get it. And I think this concern about fraud is a very real one in today's situation, right? Because we just heard that the Democrats proposed an amendment to ensure that funds would not go to pregnancy centers that had engaged in fraud. And, you know, the other side is always talking about waste and fraud. But in fact, we know that this president has pardoned about 44 people who were engaged in fraud, who were engaged in Medicaid fraud, who were engaged in Medicare fraud, who were engaged in a wide range of fraud. So this president doesn't care about fraudsters. He pardons them. He especially likes to pardon them if they've given him or one of his organizations $1 million, right? So there is definitely a transactional element to fraud. And then, so he likes to pardon fraudsters. But then what he does is the Department of Health and Human Services announced that they were freezing all TANF funding to 5 Democratic states. About $7.9 billion. They said it was fraud and provided absolutely no proof. And so what you see is an administration that uses that word, stops funding to Democrat states He's a president, and we should be a Congress for all Americans, whether you're Democrat, rural, Republican, urban. And what they do, the Republicans tend to say, use the word fraud, but refuse to actually enforce against fraud. So I think that that is a very problematic issue when they refuse to curtail fraud. They refuse the amendments to allow a state to cut funding to a pregnancy center who engages in fraud. And like you pointed out, I think it's about, I looked it up, about 77% of these centers actually are providing what is essential medical advice without a license to do so. So I am, as somebody pointed out, I am the last Democrat on the panel. Is there anything else you'd like to respond to on some of these issues?
This issue of presentation of these crisis centers being a medical entity is very serious. All these women walk into these centers thinking that they're going to get help with their pregnancy. But instead, what happens to them? Well, there is the woman like the Massachusetts woman you're talking about who thought that she was going to get help with her pregnancy, but there was a misdiagnosis and they just let her ectopic pregnancy continue, and she would have died had she not gotten help elsewhere. And in Pennsylvania, there was a pregnant woman that sought care at what she thought was a medically certified clinic, one of these clinics. During her appointment, the staff told her she already miscarried and she was sent home. As time went on, she continued experiencing pregnancy symptoms, so she later went to a licensed doctor who told her she was still pregnant and that the crisis pregnancy center had given her the wrong information. That misdiagnosis could have greatly increased her risk of having pregnancy complications. And then in Kentucky, a postpartum nurse with 20 years of experience was motivated to volunteer at a crisis pregnancy center. During her training, she learned that the clinic was using expired disinfectants to sanitize ultrasound equipment. And not only that, the kind of disinfectant the clinic was using was ineffective in targeting human papillomavirus, which causes 90% of cervical cancer cases. So the volunteer nurse quit and filed whistleblower complaints with the state. And that highlights the lack of accountability at these centers who are purporting to be medical clinics.
Thank you, Representative Chu, and I think that that is a distinction that is important, is the Democrats here are seeking accountability, and Republicans don't seem to care about that, as evidenced by the way they wrote this bill and how they voted on the amendment regarding fraud at these pregnancy centers. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
You say that so hesitatingly. Thank you. Thank you.
I did want to know more about the tariff issue, and I do think Congress should take it up. It is our constitutional duty, but, you know, maybe I'll find him on the floor of the House and ask him more questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ledger-Fernandez. Ms. Fishbach, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank Chairman Smith for bringing this forward and representing my bill and doing such a great job on that. I appreciate that. And there's just, you know, I have some things I want to say, and I will get to it. But pregnancy resource centers play such an important role in supporting women, families, and children. And they provide all kinds of things, such as pregnancy testing, counseling, parenting, education, and essential material support, like diapers, like baby clothes. And they are there from pregnancy and into childbirth and raising the child. They offer parenting classes. They do so much. And I asked about it in committee. I threw out the invitation because I don't believe that the people that are attacking these pregnancy care centers have ever been to one. If you've walked through the doors, you see the loving people who are there to help, to take care of women and their families and their the fathers. And Congressman Yakam talked a little bit about, and I hope he doesn't mind that I share, he did it, and he talked about it in Ways and Means, and he talked about how, yes, he has been to a pregnancy care center when he and his wife were first married, and he talked about they didn't have a lot of money, but she was pregnant, and they needed to potentially find out what was going on, and someone suggested they go to a pregnancy care center, and he did, and they were there, they found out what was going on, and he talked about in Ways and Means about what kind of love and support he found there, and how wonderful it was to have that. And I think he actually told at the end of the story, and you can nod or tell me if I'm telling the story wrong, but he asked how much it would cost, and they said, it's free. We do this free. And he left feeling better about what was going on and having the support and the confidence to go forward. And I believe he said she's 17, his daughter's 17 now, am I remembering correctly? And so I would hope that those folks that are so critical of a pregnancy care center would actually take the time to go through the door and to see what it's about. Because they really, the TANF dollars, the purpose, these centers actually, follow that exactly, what they are there to do, promote family stability, reduce dependency, and encourage responsible parenthood. And that's what they're doing. And they help parents through a variety of things. Like I said, the parenting classes, they advance those same goals that we are looking for those TANF dollars. And really, I know there's a lot of things going on, and I will tell you, this bill does nothing to stop a pregnancy care center from following the law. They have to follow the law. I think Congressman Smith mentioned the practicing medicine without a license. That doesn't go away. That's still against the law. So they still have to follow the law, or whatever other kinds of things that you're trying to draw or make it sound like is happening in this bill. They're not. They still have to follow the law. They still have to. They still have to meet the TANF dollar requirements. If they're getting TANF dollars, they still have to meet those requirements. But what this bill does is simply reaffirm that states may continue partnering with pregnancy care centers that are already serving families. And you know what else? Those pregnancy care centers also raise a whole lot of money independently of the TANF dollars. So they are asking for donations. They are gathering more so they can do more for the families and more for the babies and more for the women. So they're making sure that they have enough to take care of these women from the beginning until childbirth, until the entire process. And so I am really proud of this pro-family bill, because I don't want to see another administration try to stop pregnancy care centers from using these TANF dollars to help women, their families, and children in this way, because this is really truly a supportive and loving way that we can help women, children, and their families. And it is, I remember when we were talking about pregnancy care centers not that long ago, and I was looking for stories about what they'd done, and there were so many where they became literally part of the family. So between the volunteers at the pregnancy care center, they were helping this family until kids graduated high school, and they were there for them, and they became friends. They became bonded, and they were there to help and support that family. And I think that's what we want. We want to make sure that those families have support. And this bill is a very, very simple thing we can do just to make sure that states are still able to partner with those pregnancy care centers and those loving folks who I think Mr. Scott mentioned, what great work they do, and that we need to stop the attacks on these people from doing this work, because it is the kind of surrounding those women and families and those children that we need to encourage to make sure that the kids not only have a great pregnancy, childbirth, but also making sure that they have the kinds of things they need as they're bringing those children up. So I'm incredibly proud to sponsor this bill, and I thank Mr. Smith for doing such a great job, even if we digressed and went to tariffs. And I apologize for that, because you did a great job with that also. But thank you, and I'm excited to have this bill go forward. So with that, Madam Chair, I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Fishbach. I did not ask my question. Oh, Ms. Houchin, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. State programs funded by Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. These dollars are designed to help Americans rise out of poverty by supporting work, education, job training, and childcare, reducing long-term dependency on government assistance. Congress intentionally gave states broad flexibility to allocate these funds so that they can tailor programs to specifically meet the needs of their communities. And I want to reemphasize that TANF dollars are designed to help Americans rise out of poverty by supporting work, education, job training, and most notably, childcare. Across the country, we've seen that flexibility given to the states pay off. TANF-funded programs have helped parents gain jobs, complete their education, secure childcare, and build stability for their families. Yet under the Biden administration, Health and Human Services proposed a rule that would cut off TANF funding to pregnancy resource centers, even with the stated mission of promoting access to reproductive health care. So let's be clear, these dollars can be used for childcare, yet the Biden administration cut off funding to pregnancy resource centers. Now you may ask, what do pregnancy resource centers do? Well, they provide material support, parenting education, healthcare referrals for pregnant and parenting women, often serving low-income mothers who are already connected to TANF-supported services. Most importantly, they offer women an alternative to abortion and provide practical support to women and babies to help carry pregnancies to term. So it's hard for me to understand why the Biden administration would not want to support pregnancy resource centers and states' flexibility to support those types of programs. But the Biden administration blatantly sought to prevent these resources from reaching mothers and families who were seeking to complete their pregnancies to term. Congressman Smith, my question is, how does expanding the state flexibility for the use of TANF dollars for programs like family or pregnancy resource centers support mothers moving families towards self-sufficiency rather than further dependency?
Well, I think it's clear that the standards set forth by TANF back in 1996, a broad base of support to grant, as you point out, grant states flexibility, but they have basically 4 stated purposes of TANF, and I think it's pretty easy to say that to pregnancy centers, not clinics, by the way, I don't know of a single one that's called themselves a clinic, yet they still have to abide by standards that exist in various states. I don't know of any states that waive the requirement of licensing for healthcare professionals either, but they meet the purposes that TANF sets out to address, and that's reducing poverty, getting folks to a better place. Personally, I think we could do more as an entire body to address TANF and maybe some reforms for the future to make sure that the folks who need it the most receive the assistance. I won't get into some of the fraud that exists that has drawn very little concern from some of my colleagues, incidentally and interestingly enough. But the fact of the matter is, we're talking about getting TANF dollars to the people who need it, and I would challenge any reasonable person to say that where these dollars go, they ought not help the people who need the help the most.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Is there anything else you'd like to comment on?
Well, I just want to say that the pregnancy resource centers are very open about what they do. It's not a secret. It is, they take clients on a voluntary basis. No one's forced to go in there. I'll say it's fairly limited in terms of my interactions, but I've really come to appreciate the professionalism, the limitations on what they believe their role can and should be. They understand that, especially as it relates to medicine and healthcare. And seeing a qualified person, talk about a sonogram and things like that take place, that can help people in need who want more information. This is about supplying information, and again, we should celebrate that, not demonize it.
Thank you. I have visited pregnancy resource centers in my state. I do think they provide an important service, especially for women who may not want to seek abortion, but yet need that extra help through the pregnancy. And I hope that we will restore the opportunity for states to fund those programs, should they choose to do so. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Felcher. Mr. Jack, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, just briefly, I think this is a very well-written piece of legislation. I don't just say that because the author of it is sitting on the panel next to me, but I also just wanted to, for the record, could you walk us through, you built a very broad coalition of support for this legislation, some of the groups that support it, and how you found it to be so supportive by the people who advocate for this type of legislation?
Well, when you look at the application of the dollars already, I mean, the numbers kind of speak for themselves in terms of the need. And I think it's very difficult to dispute that need that does exist in all 50 states. And that, like I said, reasonable people coming together and observing folks in need and helping folks, but in a way that TANF sets out to do in terms of lifting people out of poverty, one small step at a time. And so the fact that this whole effort leverages private donations too, that I've been very impressed to hear testimonials from especially women who have been helped by a resource center. Those testimonials are very compelling. And I think that we should recognize the needs that are out there, and that we can really address those needs in a reasonable way, and prevent another administration from doing what the previous administration attempted to do and categorically prohibit TANF funds. But I'm glad that the bill is endorsed by March for Life Action, Americans United for Life, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, Heritage Foundation, Concerned Women for America, that the bill, like I said, amends the TANF statute to prohibit that discrimination that previously took place, and that we can, again, agree to help folks in need without restrictions, especially unnecessary restrictions that have been attempted.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I might have a question or two, Mr. Smith, but I feel really compelled to say a couple of things based on what I've heard here today. First, I want to associate myself with the comments Ms. Fishbach has made, well, with all of our colleagues, but particularly what Ms. Fishbach has said and what Mr. Scott said about this being an assault on clinics and on the people who are using. Mr. Scott said clinics. When I agree with you, they're called centers. Every one that I've been associated with has been called a pregnancy care center or care center. And many of them changed their names from crisis pregnancy centers to care centers.
And resource centers as well.
Or resource centers, because they wanted to emphasize that they're there to help. And I want to say, for our colleagues who say that what we're dealing with today is not serious business, I'm not sure what is more serious than life. I'm just not sure what is more serious than protecting life. And this week is about focusing on that. But these pregnancy centers do so much, as you've said. And you know, some of our colleagues talk a lot about helping families who are poor, helping families who are hungry. And if nothing else, I can't understand why they can't see the connection between what these centers do and helping poor families who are struggling to buy diapers and buy food. And if you don't have to buy diapers, guess what? You have more money to buy food. And if you have people providing clothes for your children, if you have people encouraging you, for example, and encouraging your partner, whether you're married or not married, to work with you. I just don't understand the antagonism toward these centers when our colleagues come in here and talk about needing more money to help people. When here we have volunteers, and as others have said, lots of money being raised out of the goodness of the hearts of these people in these centers to help these folks. And to say that you don't have to have training to use an ultrasound, even if a woman dies, I want somebody to show me a woman who's died as a result of visiting one of these centers. Because we looked it up, Ms. Fishbach, what is the requirement to use an ultrasound machine?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And it varies, and I will address that. But there are degrees, there are certificates, there are hands-on courses, and there's a variety of requirements, about 1 or 2 years. But there's also shorter add-ons if you're already an RN or you're already a doctor. There are, and it includes the study of anatomy and, like I said, hands-on. So you don't just go in and pick up an ultrasound and start making diagnosis. I yield.
Thanks. And the other thing that I've heard today, which we hear all the time, comments made that are very illustrative of how some of our colleagues exaggerate. So simply allowing TANF funds to be used at pregnancy support centers is going to lead to a nationwide abortion ban. Those are the kinds of things that we hear all the time. And I'm assuming, again, unlike maybe Minnesota, where there hasn't been much monitoring of how money's being used, I'm assuming that in most cases, there is accountability, we hope, for TANF funds. And so rather than saying there is no accountability for these funds, I'm sure there is. And again, the pregnancy care centers that I have visited care a great deal about making sure that babies have adequate food, adequate clothes, adequate places to live. And most of that money, most of it, comes from the goodness of people in the community, not from TANF funds or any other taxpayer funds. And for these centers to be attacked in the way they've been attacked today really is inappropriate, in my opinion. And I would welcome what Ms. Fishbach has said and say, just visit one or two, and you will not come away being critical of them. With that, I yield my time back, and seeing no further witnesses on this piece of legislation. I will excuse our witnesses. Mr. Davis, Ms. Moore. Mr. Davis, you're on my list first, so I will recognize you. I think you know the drill. We're happy to have your written comments for the record, but we'd ask you to keep your spoken comments to 5 minutes or less.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and I also want to thank all of my colleagues who have signed on as supporters of my amendment, this amendment, individuals from the Ways and Means Committee, from my state of Illinois, and from many states across the nation. The Trump administration has illegally halted tens of billions of dollars in essential child care funding from families across the nation. Funds needed so that parents can work and so child care providers can operate. Further, in an apparent act of revenge against Democratic governors, the Trump administration has illegally withheld billions of dollars in social services and welfare funding to 5 targeted states, further undermining child care, as well as weakening child protective services and undermining the health and financial well-being of children, families with disabilities, and the elderly. The Department of Health and Human Services, or H.H.Res, has no authority or constitutional authority to prevent states from accessing these funds. The statutes governing the Child Care and Development Fund, Social Services Block Grant, and the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families outline clear, specific processes for how to identify and sanction non-compliance, and the administration has followed none of them. And although they keep slandering our states, HHS has not documented any fraud or even provided specific examples of misuse of funds. When there are issues of fraud or misuse of federal funds, we strongly support addressing them. This is why Democrats were very disappointed that the Trump Health and Human Services withdrew the demand that Mississippi pay back misused TANF funds that are currently the subject of criminal prosecutions. Republicans refuse to address the administration's baseless and illegal withholding of CCDF, TANF, and SSVG funds, desperately needed by families in Illinois and 4 other states. Further, Republicans failed to challenge the illegal barriers to child care funding for all states, tribes, and territories. Congress wrote the laws this administration is violating, and it is shameful that we're not penalizing HHS's action and reminding them that Congress is a co-equal branch of government. The reckless and cruel HHS actions will inflict substantial harm on children and families in Illinois and across the country. In Illinois alone, it will harm hundreds of thousands of individuals and devastate several hundred nonprofits and small businesses. When families cannot afford child care, their parents cannot work, businesses experience instability, and loss of employees, and child care providers cannot operate. Withholding federal child care, welfare, and social service will make the lives of children and families worse, not better. It also increases the risk for child welfare involvement because research shows that material hardship increases the risk of child maltreatment. To protect children, families, the elderly, persons with disabilities, nonprofits, and businesses, my amendment would provide a new specific Health and Human Services penalty for the illegal action of preventing states from drawing down funds. While the law already requires HHS to pay these funds and specifically bars them from requiring state actions not specifically authorized in the law. HHS's current defiance of the law seemed to call for additional remedies for states that are wrong. Unfortunately, mandating future penalties will not prevent the harm to children, families, and vulnerable individuals served by these funds. That would happen without the court's temporary restraining order. So I strongly support the current legal action. My amendment would provide affected states partial compensation. Specifically, my amendment would penalize HHS for illegally withholding payment of TANF, child care entitlement to states, or SSBG funding if the agency fails to pay an amount due to a state within 5 days by requiring the agency to make a monthly payment of the amount due plus interest. HHS should be held accountable for harming individuals, families, and businesses by illegally withholding critical federal funds. I thank you, Madam Chairman, and hope that you will make my amendment in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Moore, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Rules Committee. I have an amendment that would allow TANF dollars to pay for security at child care centers. As Mrs. Houchin so eloquently shared with us, that of the 4 core functions and purposes of TANF, that providing child care so that women can be engaged in the workforce is one of the core functions of TANF. And without child care, women would not be able to meet their obligations, responsibilities, and opportunities to be engaged with the workforce. It's a very simple and straightforward amendment. The background for this amendment, Madam Chair and Mr. Ranking Member, is that TANF has always known that childcare had to be a part of the package. But because of the scandal around childcare expenditures in Minnesota, we have seen influencers show up at childcare centers in Ohio, Minnesota, Washington State, Maine, Massachusetts, Oregon, Pennsylvania, bombarding employees with questions about the legitimacy of their businesses, demanding to see and engage with the minor children inside. And I want to just remind you that these are vulnerable children, Madam Chair. These are not law enforcement officials that are coming in, people from the Justice Department. They're not children protective service workers. They're not people from the Health Department. They are influencers and harassers. They have no authority to investigate the legitimacy of the center, to demand to see records, or certainly not to have access to people's children. They're not concerned about fraud. They're using it as a cover to harass childcare workers in the church and the families upon which they would do it. I don't have to, I guess, Madam Chair, you would certainly realize that were women not to be able to access childcare, because by definition, these people on TANF have children, it's antithetical to TANF's core purpose of promoting job preparation if they couldn't have childcare. And so we just want to say affirmatively that these funds can be used for, unfortunately, for security. And just to say, unlike the provision which provided funding, which is providing for funding for the pregnancy centers, we're sort of shoehorning that in as a qualification. It's not part of the core essential responsibilities and purposes of TANF, whereas childcare is. Madam Chair, people on this panel have accused critics of the bill that provides funding to the pregnancy childcare centers. And no one is criticizing providing diapers to kids till they're 6 months old or parenting classes to parents. Certainly, I think of worthy organizations like St. Jude's, the March of Dimes, but TANF doesn't give them money because that's not the purpose of TANF. We ought to have a bill that funds pregnancy centers, and I'll tell you why, Madam Chair. There are 2,633 pregnancy care centers as of like 2 years ago. And after we put these provisions in place, there'll be even more. And in 1996, we appropriated $16.5 billion for TANF, and that has not changed for what, 20 years? There's just not enough money to shoehorn yet another, however worthy it may be, to provide counseling to people. It is not the purpose of TANF. TANF replaced the old aid to families with for dependent children. We're expecting mothers to go to work. They need childcare. They need training. They need job search. And as Ms. Houchin so craftily and carefully articulated, there's this flexibility. There's this flexibility that we have seen with my own football star champion, Brett Favre, use that flexibility to fund a soccer field for his daughter. I've seen it balance state budgets. I've seen it build infrastructure for luxury apartments. We're supposed to be fighting the expansion of TANF so that it can meet its core mission. And after 20 years of not one single extra penny in funding, we can ill afford to do it. But I do think that these child care centers, according to my, in sync with my amendment, need security so that parents who are out meeting their work obligations can secure their children. And thank you for listening, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Scott, do you have any questions? No. Mr. McGovern.
I thank you both for your testimony. I support your amendments. I fear that these are, a lot of what we're doing this week are messaging bills, and that I fear that we're going to see closed rules instead of an opportunity for people to debate ideas on the House floor. But I thank you for coming, and again, for what it's worth, you have my support.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Griffith.
I don't have any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell.
Thank you, and I wanted to thank Rep. Moore for mentioning the need for accountability in how TANF dollars are spent, because We know that we have families so much in need, and making sure that the money we're appropriating is going to those families rather than other projects is so critically important. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jack?
No questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Leisure Fernandez?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, both of you, for presenting the amendments. And I thought that that was a very interesting point you made, Representative Moore. If they really wanted to support these, they should put money into it because there already isn't enough money, right? And this could have been a priority instead of giving tax breaks to billionaires, right? So they are making choices, and they made choices to give tax breaks to billionaires rather than to support programs like this. And thank you also for pointing out how horrible it is to have child care centers
Come under siege.
come under siege, right? With people wanting, of course you're going to shut your doors to influencers who are coming in with TVs and cameras. It's like, you cannot let them look at your children, and for that to then lead to the chaos that we have in Minnesota is really reprehensible. So thank you for bringing that out as well.
And thank you for asking that question. And I would just say to the panel, those of you who have not had questions, this certainly fits very neatly into the core purposes of TANF funds. We probably don't even really need an amendment to just start providing security for child care centers, given the core purpose of child care with regard to the mission of TANF. And so for those of you who don't have any questions, I would assume that if a child care center actually hired a security officer, say in Minnesota, that there would be no objection from anyone about the expenditures of those funds.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Leisure Fernandez? Ms. Fishbach, you're recognized.
I have no questions, Madam Chair.
Well, I just want to say that I think pregnancy resource centers are well suited for a program like TANF because they provide material support free of charge and aid pregnant and parenting mothers in developing critical life skills to gain economic self-sufficiencies. And these centers are not diverting money away from low-income mothers and children. Instead, they're providing these families with services and support like counseling, diapers, clothes, connections to housing and jobs. In 2024, pregnancy centers provided a value of over $452 million in total medical care, support, and education services and material goods. 8 in 10 centers provided low or low-cost medical services. I see no one else wishing to speak on this bill. Is there anyone seeking to testify on H.J.Res 140, H.R. 6359, or H.R. 6945? Seeing none, this closes the hearing portion of our meeting. Thank you all very much.
And thank you.
The chair will be in receipt of a motion from the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Madam Chair, I move the committee grant H.R. 6945, the Supporting Pregnant and Parenting Women and Families Act, a closed rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 119-17 shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means or their respective designees. The rule provides 1 motion to recommit. The rule further provides for consideration of H.R. 6359, the Pregnant Students' Rights Act, under a closed rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Education and Workforce now printed in the bill shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and Workforce or their respective designees. The rule provides 1 motion to recommit. The rule further provides for consideration of H.J.Res 140, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5, United States Code of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Public Land Order Number 7917 for withdrawal of federal lands, Cook Lake and St. Louis counties, Minnesota, under a closed rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the joint resolution. The rule provides that the joint resolution shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the joint resolution. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources or their respective designees. Finally, the rule provides 1 motion to recommit.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You have now heard the motion. Is there any discussion or amendment to the rule? Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, so again, just for the record, we had 3 bills that we considered in the Rules Committee today, and all 3 are going to be considered under completely closed rules. But I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 1 to H.R. 6945 offered by Representative Del Bene, which would prohibit a pregnancy center from receiving TANF funds if a state medical board finds that they have provided misleading or deceptive medical information or services or endangered the health of women. And I just say, that, I mean, this one should be a no-brainer. It allows funding for pregnancy centers to continue unless a center has lied to or endangered women. If you care about fraud and abuse, you shouldn't want taxpayer dollars going towards scams and fake health care. So I'd urge a yes vote on my motion, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, the question is on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
No.
Nay. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Yes, for roll call, Madam Chair.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
No.
Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Roy, no. Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 8 nays.
The noes have it. The amendment's not agreed to. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Pardon me. Are there further motions? Nope. Hearing no further discussion, the question is on the motion from the gentleman from Georgia. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to.
We ask for roll call.
A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
Yes.
Mrs. Fishbach, aye. Mr. Norman? Mr. Roy? Aye. Mr. Roy, aye. Mrs. Houchin? Aye. Mrs. Houchin, aye. Mr. Langworthy? Aye. Mr. Langworthy, aye. Mr. Scott? Aye. Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Griffith? Aye. Mr. Griffith, aye. Mr. Jack?
Aye.
Mr. Jack, aye. Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Ms. Scanlon? No. Ms. Scanlon, no. Mr. Neguse? Ms. Ledger Fernandez? No. Ms. Ledger Fernandez, no. Madam Chair?
Aye.
Madam Chair, aye.
The clerk will report the total.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to report is agreed to. Accordingly, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, will be managing this rule for the majority,
And I'll be handling it for the Democrats.
and Mr. McGovern will handle it for the Democrats. Without objection, the committee is adjourned.